40 years before the fall of the temples, according to sacred historians, God sent forth his servants, the prophets, to warn of impending doom, putting religious and political leaders on notice, as you will. Repent or else. But those warnings went unheeded. And as for the prophets, some were mocked, some were beaten, some were imprisoned, and some were killed. But as for their words came to pass, because the words that they spoke were not their own, but the words of the one who sent them. The temples would indeed fall. Not one stone would be left upon another. I'm Ross Nichols for Horeb Institute, and this, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, is Sunday School. The wait is over. I'm so happy to be with you here today. I'm glad you joined me. And before I get started in the class, I think a few comments about what Sunday School is all about and what it's going to be about are in order. So let me just take just a minute or so, kind of hit some highlights. In the after-class discussion, I'll talk a bit more about my method. So let me just say, let's start with the obvious. Why the shift, Ross, from Saturdays to Sunday? Look, for nearly, I would say, a little bit over 20 years, every Saturday at 10:30 a.m., I'm used to saying Shabbat Shalom, welcome, and so it feels a little bit different for me as well. So if you think it feels different for you, imagine the way it feels for me. This is not to be misunderstood. I don't want anybody to think that somehow after all these years I've forgotten that Friday evening to Saturday evening is Shabbat. And look, I know that that can be debated, but I still hold to the Saturday Sabbath. So let me just get that out of the way up front. What I wanted to do was I wanted to make it a point to tell you that I am now able, for the first time in more than 2 decades, to truly cease on the Sabbath day and spend it with family and so forth. And I hope that you do the same. In some ways, this allows me even more so to be able to honor, to guard, and to remember the Sabbath. So that's out of the way. That's the main thing. Now, as far as Sunday, why not do it on any day? Well, Sunday is the beginning of the week. So the way that I view this is that you get to kick off your week. You get to begin the week with a Sunday school. And the reason that I like the name Sunday School is if you've ever been involved in a good Sunday school, which I think this might be, then you know what it's like. And so I want to create for the world on the internet a Sunday school class. And you're welcome to join me in my Sunday school class. So let me tell you a little bit about the Sunday school classes. Again, this is very high level, top tier. Sunday school is the Bible for everyone. And what do I mean by everyone? Well, I mean exactly that, regardless of what you believe or whether or not you believe. Sunday school is for you. You're welcome to be part of it. I want to encourage people to get along. There are going to be people with a lot of different ideas and different viewpoints, but let's come together and let's look at these texts in a meaningful way, a historical way, and let's have some discussions. Let's dig deep. Let's get into the meat of the subject, and you're going to be part of that, and that's one of the reasons we do an after-class discussion every week. I also want to talk a little bit about perspective. It's not really about presenting a Jewish perspective or a Christian perspective. I'm not going to really come at you with an apologetic fundamentalist view. Those who know me know that that's true. But I'm also not going to be polemical. This is not going to be the time where we air our differences, so to speak. We're going to allow the text, we're going to allow the sources to speak for themselves. I've often said in my classes on the Hebrew Bible, particularly my studies of the Pentateuch, that we're going to be honest to Moses. When we get into Christian material, the New Testament writings, we're going to be honest to Jesus, I promise you. This is going to be a very straight down the line, as much as we can, recover what we can, and present that material as it is. So, in other words, I aim to present a view which helps all of us to understand the Bible in its original contexts. If you didn't understand that, I put an S on the end. Context. We're going to bring forward quite a bit of material that's going to help us to put things in the right order as they were intended by the authors. Now, I'm going to try to be, as best I can, informed by direct content or direct contact with original sources. So what are we going to use in these Sunday school classes? We're going to be referring to the Hebrew Bible. We're going to refer to the New Testament, to the Dead Sea Scrolls. We're going to involve some Jewish literature, the Talmud, the Mishnah, various things of that sort. We're going to bring historical sources to the fore. I'm going to be talking to you about Josephus and quoting Josephus when that material is necessary for our understanding. We'll be looking at Apocrypha and Pseudepigrapha, etc., etc. So we're going to dive in to these ancient sources, and we're going to try to derive from that some good, solid historical information. Remember, the name of the game is exegesis and not eisegesis, meaning we're going to pull from the text as best we can the original intent of the authors. Now, this is made possible because of my studies over the past decades. I mean, I've been very blessed to have a desire planted in me by my first Bible teacher, who is my mother, and I hope she's listening. But I learned not just from her a love and appreciation for the text, which has been passed down, like many of you, for generations, right? But I've had other great teachers of the Bible that I've looked up to. But just so you know, all of the results of my studies are my own. In other words, you don't have to blame my previous teachers for my conclusions today. But what I did was I took the mission of diving deep into these texts for a better understanding that I received from all these people who've gone before. It's like I stand on the shoulders of giants. But the main mission is to bring out the truth from history, and that sometimes is a little bit of a challenge, as many of you know. I'm going to be using English. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to refer to original languages. Let's say original languages: Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek. We're going to be diving deep. We're going to be looking at text in the original languages for checks and balances, to go back and look at what did this text mean? What did it say in our sources? But that means we're going to look at the Masoretic text of the Hebrew Bible. But we're going to compare the Masoretic text of the Hebrew Bible to other manuscripts. We'll look at the Samaritan Pentateuch. We'll look at Dead Sea Scrolls. We're going to bring in some Septuagint when we talk about these texts. As far as the New Testament, we're going to look at the Greek behind the English of the received text. But we're also going to look at Hebrew Gospels when we get into that material. We're taking more of a critical look at some of these texts because our goal is to really look deep and see if we can determine from our varied sources which of these texts best represents the actual history. Now, when I say I'm going to use English, I'm a fan of the ASV, the American Standard Version of 1901. I like the formal feel of the text. I like this particular translation, and I'll be using that to teach from. Doesn't mean that I won't pull other text. Doesn't mean that at times I won't translate literally from the original text. But ASV 1901 is going to be the main text of these classes, and you'll find various links to not only this particular Bible that I'll be using in the description of every video, but you follow me closely enough and you'll hear more about how I want to use the ASV in various projects. By using the ASV of 1901, I will be using the form of the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh will be Jehovah. Doesn't mean that I don't know that you, individual viewer, know the exact correct pronunciation, and it might not agree with mine. I know about Yahweh. I know about Yahuwah. I know about Yehovah. I'm familiar with the debates around the name. Work with me on this if you can, and I hope you can, because I want to stick with a form that people are familiar with. I want to use the form that's in the ASV, and this is not because I'm not appreciative of or respectful of various sensibilities around the name. I'm also going to at times use terms and phrases and designations that might, as we say, set your hair on fire because you don't agree with me. I might say Old Testament. I might say New Testament. I know that there are other phrases and other designations for these. Sometimes I might refer to a date and I'll say BC, AD. Typically, I'll qualify that with or BCE, CE. We'll talk more about that later. I'm going to make every effort in these classes to bring the Bible to everyone, regardless of where they are. For years, I've worked in a niche, within a niche. I've had certain approaches, and I've used almost vocabulary that a lot of people couldn't understand. I'm going to speak English. I'm going to teach in English. Now, 12 weeks ago, I announced that I would be doing a new series on Jesus and the Gospels. People have different opinions of that. But nonetheless, I will be doing that, and this is class 1. Here's the deal. I started a week early. I threw a curveball because I wasn't supposed to start until next week, but I decided that I needed a class to prepare not only me, but to prepare the viewer for what was to come, to lay the groundwork, to build a strong foundation, and to lead us into the subject that I want to begin with. I want to put you, the viewer, on the ground, on the scene, and witness various things that I want to extrapolate, that I want to build on, that I want to take forward in future classes. So we will be doing, beginning next week, this builds the foundation for next week's. So in order to do that, I have to step back. By step back, I mean way back. First of all, I want you to come with me, not physically, but in a way, mentally, spiritually, and I want you and I to go together to look at a period of time. I'm basically taking 1,000 years of the vast history of humanity, and I'm going to think about and help you to think about the times of the temples, right? So this class is a bridge from the Hebrew Bible to, or the first temple period, let's say it like that, to the second temple period. And I'm using an approximate time frame of 1,000 years from the time that Solomon dedicates the temple in 1 Kings chapter 8 for reference, all the way until it's destroyed in the year 70 AD or CE by the Romans. So it's roughly 1,000 years. The times of the temples is where we begin, because these houses of the holy, if I can call them that, made with human hands, I'm going to talk about those houses, not specifically about the temples so much, but the worlds in which they were erected, the worlds in which they stood. They'll serve, if you will, as a backdrop. Now, what I want you to know going into this is if we look at these the way that I want to look at it initially, you're going to see things are quite similar between one and the other. A lot of people don't make this association. I assure you that some of what will come in the next several weeks you may not have considered. And that's no slight on you. What I'm saying is that as we look at this period and as we look at the first temple and we look at the second temple, we're going to bridge between the two and we're going to look for areas of similarity and congruence. And look, the literature concerning both of these houses of the holy made with hands, is quite extensive. It's not lacking in detail. We have details of their building each. We have words and records and sources about various expansions, various repairs, renovations. But we also have sources that tell us about times of neglect where these houses of the holy made with hands went into disrepair. And ultimately, both were destroyed. So similar are the stories in our sources about these two houses that there is an uncanny repetition in the story, and that is where I want to begin. I want you to open your Bibles this morning, blow the dust off, fan and feather the pages, and go to the book of Ecclesiastes, and I want you to open up to Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and verse 9 and 10. Now, if you're using the CRB, you'll see CRB. What I want you to understand is that is a reference to the cross-reference Bible. The link is in the description. Here we go. First verse in verse 9. That which hath been is that which shall be, and that which hath been done is that which shall be done. There is no new thing under the sun. Is there a thing whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It hath been long ago in the ages which were before us. Now, I have a couple of other verses in Ecclesiastes that say the same thing in chapter 3 and verse 15, in chapter 2 and verse 12, and chapter 6 and verse 10. Here's what this is saying, very plainly, that if you want to know what is going to happen, at least according to our sacred historians, you have to be familiar with what has already been. So you study history in order to understand prophecy. You study what has happened according to sacred literature if you want to know what is going to happen. Now, I think most people are quite familiar with the idea of at least one of the similarities between the first temple and the second temple. Most of us know that they were both destroyed in the same Hebrew month. Very interesting. In most people, in all of our sources, I don't know of a source which gives another month, place the destruction of both of the houses in the month of Av. This is the 5th month on the religious calendar, the 11th month on the civil calendar. It falls roughly in our summer. Well, I can't say that because some people are listening in Australia and yours is upside down. In my summer, in July and August, whatever the temperature is or whatever season it is where you live, that's the idea. So that's about when the month of Av falls on the Jewish calendar. Now, let me say that some of our sources will say that both temples were destroyed on the same day. Most of you know Tisha B'Av, as it's put in Hebrew, the 9th of Av. Quite a few sources will tell us that both temples were destroyed on the 9th of Av. If we go back and study the original sources, such as Jeremiah chapter 52, verse 12, if we look at Josephus' Wars, book 6, if we look at those two, we see that according to those sources, it dates the fall of the first temple to the 10th of Av, not the 9th. If we look at 2 Kings chapter 25, verse 8 and following, we get a different date. We get the 7th. Now, these differences are explained in various sources in an attempt to reconcile by saying, well, it didn't happen in one day, Ross. It took a few days. It begins on the 7th, the end of the end, if you will, and it takes a few days. So the 7th to the 10th. According to tradition, the 9th of Av splits the difference, right? That's close enough for tradition. Now, I'll bring up in these courses, in these classes, various traditional views, and then I'll bring in other historical points to sort of bring us more towards what do the sources say. But be that as it may, again, the 9th of Av is close enough to say that both temples fell on the same day. In fact, according to the Talmud, and you can look this up, it's outside the scope of my class today, the 9th of Av came to be associated with a day upon which calamities came again and again and again to the people of Israel. But that again brings me to the idea in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verses 9 and 10, and the other passages that were on the screen. The idea is that history has this repetition that seems to come up again and again. Good things, bad things, you start noticing patterns. So really, a big part of what we're going to be talking about today and next week and on into future classes is the idea of studying what we see in terms of patterns. And I think that you, like me, are surprised by those things when they come into our view. Now, but there's a lot more. That's why I'm doing a class on this. There's a lot more similarity between the first temple and the second temple than just the date or the approximate date that it fell. There's a lot more. And that's what we're going to begin to talk about. I want you to imagine that you go into a theater, or a theater, if you pronounce it that way, and you sit down in the auditorium seating, and before you, the curtain opens. And you have not one screen, as is the case in most theaters, but you have two screens. And the credits roll, and they look similar enough, but it's playing on two screens. And then you start noticing details. One of the screens is black and white. The other appears to be digitally enhanced, and it's in color. And on the black and white, it's got a little static. But this one is very clear. And the main characters walk out, and they're different actors, but they're following what appears to be the same script. This, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, is the story that I want to present in the next couple of weeks, because one screen, obviously the older one, represents the first temple period and the fall and the time leading up to the fall. The time leading up to that fall. The one that's been digitally enhanced, it's a little bit clearer, a little more modern. It represents the fall of the second temple and the events and the characters, the actors, the players that lead up to that destruction. And we are going to find some incredible similarities between these stories. So get ready. Now, today's class and next week's class is not really about the temples. You might think, well, what was all that about? I have to prepare you because the temples are going to stand in the background, almost like a backdrop for our two shows that we're watching. It's there, and it's a big part of each of these stories. So it's got to be in the story, and it is, and it plays a vital role in understanding. But what I really want to look at is what led to, what does the script tell us about the time before, leading up to the destruction in the first temple and in the second temple. So I'm really more concerned about the actors in these unfolding dramas. The temples are looming in the background, but who are the players? Who is front and center? I want you to come with me. Just play along. Come with me to a time 40 years before the destruction of the first temple. So direct your attention in our imaginary theater to the screen that's black and white. We're talking about the first temple. The other one's going on, and it's basically the same movie, but I want you to focus with me. I'm going to bring you to a year 627, 626 BC or BCE, right? And the reason I need to bring you there is because I want to introduce you to my favorite prophet by the name of Jeremiah. I want you to go with me to the book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. Jeremiah 1, 1 through 3. And if you have the cross-reference Bible, that is going to be page 1327 because they're paginated the same. Now, verse 1, the words of Jeremiah, the son of Hilkiah, of the priests that were in Anathoth in the land of Benjamin, to whom the word of Jehovah came in the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah, in the 13th year of his reign. It came also in the days of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, unto the end of the 11th year of Zedekiah, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, unto the carrying away of Jerusalem captive in the 5th month, which is the month of Ab, by the way. So what we're going to do is we're going to first of all recognize that we're in a year, 626, let's call it, that leads to a 40-year period. So Jeremiah is called to be a prophet 40 years before the temple falls. It's going to fall in 587, 586 BC. So that's 40 years. I find that to be interesting, and you will as well if you don't already make certain connections. If certain bells aren't going off, they will. So we get the start in 626, leading us to a 40-year period. This is when it's the 13th year of Josiah's reign. And here is what we know about Jeremiah's calling. If you look at I'm going to skip down to verse 9 of chapter 1, Jeremiah 1:9. Then Jehovah put forth his hand and touched my mouth. Notice, by the way, first person. This is presented as Jeremiah telling the story firsthand, right? And Jehovah said unto me, behold, I have put my words in thy mouth. See, I have this day set thee over the nations and over kingdoms to pluck up, to break down, and to destroy, and to overthrow, to build and to plant. That's the call of Jeremiah. And then what follows this call, and Jeremiah is not chronologically arranged, but I will say this appears to be part of the original calling of Jeremiah. He's given two visions back to back, and those visions are of the rod of an almond tree and a boiling cauldron, an almond tree branch and a cauldron that is boiling. And the idea, the message is clear. It's interpreted for us in the text. It's coming. Destruction is coming soon and certain. All right? Now, this message that Jeremiah has to give is not a pleasant message. He will have to go before political and religious leaders, and when I tell you that that message will not be well received, that is the understatement of the millennium. I'm telling you, it's not well received, but he's got to do it. A lot of people know of Jeremiah as the weeping prophet. Well, you put his hat on, you try his job. He's got a very difficult job. But as you'll see, it's not just Jeremiah who has this difficult job. It's anyone, let me just say, that stands against the religious and political establishment of their day with a message from God, right? This is the world that we are now entering. Now, there's a message that is conveyed, speaking of the political and religious establishment, in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. 2 Kings 22:23, 2 Chronicles 34:35, both of which present that there's a revival in the land. Everybody say, yay, revival. There's a revival in the land, and everything is going good if you ask the word from the main office. But if you were to interview the following people, you would not get that there's a revival in the land. Let me just name a few. How about Jeremiah? Jeremiah, do you know of a revival? Revival? Are you kidding me? Zephaniah, how about you? No. How about Uriah ben Shemaiah? We're going to talk about him in a minute. He didn't know about a revival. Hulda's a prophetess. Maybe she'll tell us the truth. Hulda, is there a revival in the land that you know about? She would say no. In fact, all of the prophets, all of the ones who are hearing the word of God, according to the text, I'm not making this up. I wish I was, but I'm not. Those people all saw destruction is coming. You said, but wait a minute. The temple has been restored. The cult has been restored. It's functioning. The priests are doing. None of that influences the people who are hearing directly from God. We're going to do a quick case study by looking at a few texts in Jeremiah, and some of these texts we may read a couple of times in the class today because we're looking at different elements. I want you to look with me at Jeremiah chapter 7. Jeremiah chapter 7 is known as, Jeremiah chapter 7 is known as a temple sermon. Well, they call it that because Jeremiah is told to go in the temple and preach this sermon, to proclaim these words. We're going to look in a moment at chapter 26 because chapter 7 and chapter 26 are describing the same temple sermon. Chapter 7, verse 1, the word that came to Jeremiah from Jehovah saying, stand in the gate of Jehovah's house. Boy, you talk about front and center. And proclaim here this word and say, hear the word of Jehovah, all ye of Judah that enter in at these gates to worship Jehovah. That's our setting, right? I'm going to skip over quite a bit of this because I'm just looking at one particular part of this. Look at verse 12. This is Jeremiah with the message that Jehovah gave him. But go ye, he's talking to the group that are standing in the temple. They're in the temple, right? Go ye now unto my place which was in Shiloh, where I caused my name to dwell at the first, and see what I did to it for the wickedness of my people Israel. And now, because ye have done all these works, saith Jehovah, and I spake unto you, rising up early and speaking, but you heard not, and I called you, but ye answered not. Therefore will I do unto the house which is called by my name, wherein ye trust, and unto the place which I gave to you and to your fathers, as I did at Shiloh. And I will cast you out of my sight, as I have cast out all your brethren, even the whole seed of Ephraim. And he goes on. Jeremiah is saying to the priest and the people who are going in and out of the house, this place is going to be destroyed. Now, look with me at chapter 26 because this is the same temple sermon. Again, if you want to know more about the order of Jeremiah, I've got a 25-part series on it. That's not what we're going to do today. Chapter 26, verse 4 and following. By the way, if you read the beginning of chapter 26, we know that this is in the days of Jehoiakim, the beginning of his reign. So Josiah has died, his son Jehoiakim is reigning. Now I want you to look at verse 4. And you shall say unto them, by the way, if you look back at verse 2, it's the same story as 7. Go stand in the court and proclaim these words. Thus says Jehovah, if ye will not hearken to me to walk in my law, which I have set before you. Remember, it was discovered in the time of Josiah and Jeremiah. Verse 5, to hearken to the words of my servants the prophets, whom I send unto you, even rising up early and sending them, but ye have not hearkened. Then I will make this house like Shiloh, and will make this city a curse to all the nations of the earth. Again, it's hard to stop, but we have to stop to move forward. Go down to verse 11, Jeremiah 26. Then spake the priest and the prophets unto the princes and to all the people, saying, this man is worthy of death, for he hath prophesied against this city, as you've heard with your ears. Right? So I want you to get the gravity of the situation. Jeremiah's told by his God, and their God, supposed to be, to go proclaim in the house dedicated to the name of that God, that that house will be destroyed unless they remedy their way. And what do they respond to that? They say that he, Jeremiah, the one speaking on behalf of God, is worthy of death. Now, here's what Jeremiah responds to that. In verse 12, it says, then spake Jeremiah unto all the princes and to all the people, saying, Jehovah sent me to prophesy against this house. Against this house. He said that God said to go prophesy against the temple. Interesting. Now, let me tell you something. They would have killed him. The religious leaders wanted to kill him because he prophesied against that house. And they would have. But someone voiced an opposition to that. Look at verse 18. Because what they ultimately do, his friends, because he did have at least one family that he was friends with, who saved him, basically. And the way they saved him was they said, hey, I'm paraphrasing, you can go read the full story yourself later. They said, look, we shouldn't kill him because remember Micah the Morasthite? Micah the Morasthite, in the days of Hezekiah, he prophesied that the temple would be destroyed, and Hezekiah didn't kill him, and so they let him live. Let's look at verse 18. Here you go. 18. Micah the Morasthite prophesied in the days of Hezekiah, king of Judah, and he spake to all the people of Judah, saying, thus saith Jehovah of hosts, Zion shall be plowed as a field, and Jerusalem shall become heaps, and the mountain of the house as the high places of a forest. You see, Micah said, in fact, you can flip to Micah chapter 3 and verse 12 while I tell his story, page 1691, if you have the cross-reference Bible. Micah chapter 3, 1691, chapter 3 and verse 12. Micah said, therefore shall Zion for your sake be plowed as a field, and Jerusalem shall become heaps, and the mountain of the house as the high place of a forest. He looks and sees that the land upon which the temple stood and upon the house that the people placed their trust in, and the religion that was going on in that place, he looked at that and said, this will all be gone. And you can plant crops. There'll be trees growing here. There'll be farmland is what this place is going to be. And how well do you think people receive a message like that? So Jeremiah was spared. And thank God, because he had a lot more to write. But go back with me to Jeremiah, because not every prophet fared so well with the religious authorities of the first temple period. If we look at chapter 26, where we just dropped off, where they used Micah and his prophecy against the temple to save Jeremiah, now we're going to pick it up and say, whoo, thank goodness, Jeremiah was spared. Well, not Uriah ben Shemaiah. Look at verse 20 of chapter 26. And there was also a man that prophesied in the name of Jehovah, Uriah ben Shemaiah, or Uriah the son of Shemaiah of Kiriath Yearim. And he prophesied against this city and against this land according to all the words of Jeremiah. Now, we already know that the words that Jeremiah preached got Jeremiah nearly killed. And Uriah ben Shemaiah is preaching the same message. He doesn't know anything about a revival. Shh, don't tell the authorities. Listen, verse 21. And when Jehoiakim, the king, and all his mighty men and all the princes heard his words, because he's preaching against the temple, the king sought to put him to death. But when Uriah heard it, he was afraid, and he fled and went into Egypt. Oh, thank goodness, Uriah got out. And Jehoiakim, the king, sent men into Egypt, namely Elnathan, the son of Akbor, and certain men with him into Egypt, and they fetched forth Uriah out of Egypt. I wonder what they're going to do. And brought him unto Jehoiakim the king. Well, at least he'll get a fair trial. Who slew him with the sword and cast his dead body into the graves of the common people. Whew. Man. Now I want to point something out. It hadn't been that long in this narrative since the temple was renovated and rededicated, and the revival is all over the place. You can't go anywhere, according to the official word, without encountering revival. And this happened. So it made me think, I wonder if there are other examples of renovations, restorations, rededications, and prophets and, that kind of thing to establish a pattern. And I found another one. This revival, but let me say revival, took place in the days of a king by the name of Joash. Some sources call him Jehoash. And that's going to be roughly, according to most authorities, 836 BCE to 798, right? So we're talking about 9th century, early 9th century BC. And there is a king that we're going to read about in 2 Chronicles chapter 24. That's going to be the story that we're going to next. If you have the cross-reference Bible, it's page 775. And just to kind of set the stage, it's interesting because this particular king, Joash or Jehoash, he's 7 years old when he begins to reign, which is not, it's pretty similar to what we read about Josiah, who's 8 years old when he begins to reign. But go to chapter 24 of 2 Chronicles, verse 4. His story begins in the first verse, but we're going to pick it up in verse 4. And it came to pass after this that Joash was minded to restore the house of Jehovah. That sounds good so far. He wants to renovate the house. And if you read what follows, that's exactly what happens. They collect money from the people, and everything is going in the right direction, it seems. And by the way, there's a godly priest. His name is Jehoiada. And Jehoiada, as long as Jehoiada is alive and working and kind of superintending things, it sounds like things went pretty well. Jehoiada, thank God for Jehoiada. And we read through the story. Now, what I'd like to do is pick up in verse 18, and just to let you know, in verse 15, we read that Jehoiada died. So let's see how they go after Jehoiada dies. Verse 18, and they forsook the house of Jehovah, the God of their fathers, and served the Asherim and the idols, and wrath came upon Judah and Jerusalem for this their guiltiness. Oh, let's keep reading. 19. Yet he sent prophets to them to bring them again unto Jehovah, and they testified against them, but they would not give ear. And the Spirit of God came upon Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada, the priest. So he's got the Spirit on him. He's about to prophesy. And he stood above the people, and he said unto them, Thus saith God, why transgress ye the commandments of Jehovah, so that ye cannot prosper? Because you have forsaken Jehovah, he hath also forsaken you. I wonder how they're going to respond to that, because it's not a good message. You don't think it's going to be received very well, do you? Verse 21, and they conspired against him and stoned him with stones at the commandment of the king. Where'd this happen? In the court of the house of Jehovah. They killed the prophet in the temple because he told them a message from God that things were not right. And they killed him. Now, it's interesting that at least here we seem to have an uncanny repetition. Renovations, repairs, it feels a little bit like, you know how you feel when fall comes and it's kind of cool? It feels like there's revival in the air. Things are going well, and then straight back into the badness. Prophet comes, gives a message about the temple being destroyed, and the people don't like the message, and they kill the prophet. Whew. Let's go back to Jeremiah. Let's see if it gets better. Go to Jeremiah chapter 12 and verse 7, page 1357 in the cross-reference Bible. Chapter 12 and verse 7. I just want to pick up a single verse here. According to the sacred historians, this is God speaking. I have forsaken my house. I have cast off my heritage. I have given the dearly beloved of my soul into the hand of her enemies. And it goes on and on. The house that was supposed to be built as a house of prayer, something went badly wrong, and people rebelled. God sent a prophet to straighten them out. Prophet's message was rejected, and the prophet was either threatened and or, well, we'll get to that. Meanwhile, in Babylon, if I can take you with me, let's leave Jerusalem just for a moment, and let's go to Babylon, because in Babylon, we've already had several waves of captives taken from Jerusalem to Babylon. One of those is Ezekiel ben Buzi. Ezekiel ben Buzi is a prophet and a priest, and his book gives quite a bit of detail about what's going on. He's hearing the message in Babylon about what's going on in Jerusalem. He didn't have the means in which we have. Messengers are bringing the message and letting him know what's going on in Jerusalem. But Ezekiel has another way to know what's happening in Jerusalem. It's through the word of God is coming to him in visions and through personal tragedy. That's right. Chapter 24, go with me to 24. We're going to work our way to verse 19. So go ahead and go to, again, if you've got the Bible, it's 1531. Ezekiel chapter 24. I want to tell you a little bit about the story that's going on in this chapter. This is towards the end, before the temple is destroyed, but it's dated the same date that armies surround Jerusalem. Look it up. If you look at chapter 24, a tragedy is coming Ezekiel's way. But Ezekiel, as a prophet, is having to receive this tragedy to mirror, if you will, the tragedy that is going to befall everyone, right? You know how we read the stories about how these prophets had to go through some really bad things to demonstrate, to illustrate to and through them what God is going to do. Remember, Amos chapter 3, verse 7, God will do nothing unless he reveals his secret unto his servants, the prophets. And this is one of the ways that happens, and it's not comfortable, and it's not fun to talk about. But Ezekiel, according to chapter 24, as the armies are surrounding Jerusalem, his wife dies. And the message is this: just as the dearly beloved to your eyes is taken out, so will the dearly beloved, this temple that they love so much, it too will be taken out. Now look at verse 19 of chapter 24. And I want to read verse 19 through 21. And the people said unto me, notice, first person, wilt thou not tell us what these things are to us, that thou doest so? Then I said unto them, the word of Jehovah came unto me, saying, speak unto the house of Israel, thus saith the Lord Jehovah, behold, I will profane my sanctuary, the pride of your power, the desire of your eyes, and that which your soul pitieth, and your sons and your daughters whom you've left behind shall fall by the sword. And it goes on. Just as Jeremiah understands the painful message, the same painful message that he receives in personal tragedy, armies are surrounding Jerusalem. And he hears from God in Babylon, according to the sacred historians, that just as he lost the desire of his eyes, so too would the people lose the desire of their eyes. 40 years before the destruction of the first temple, God sent forth his servants, the prophets, with a message of impending doom. But it was not just 40 years before, but it was even earlier than that. Some were mocked, some were beaten, some were imprisoned, and some were killed. Zechariah ben Jehoiada, the son of the priest, killed in the court of the Lord's house. Jeremiah beaten and imprisoned. Zephaniah, we don't know. Huldah, we don't know. We do know that their message was one of impending destruction, and those words came to pass. But I want you to notice something. Let me not leave off the man Uriah ben Shemaiah, who also was killed in Jeremiah 26, verse 20 through 24, because he preached the same message of doom and gloom that Jeremiah had preached. This house is going to be destroyed. Now, not only did God send his prophets, and they just kind of took their time to give the message, they rather, it says, rising early and sending. Consider 10 texts with me. I mean, I could give you one, but I'm going to go through 10 texts which say that not only did God send a prophet, whether it's Jeremiah, and many of these are, or other prophets, which he mentions as well, he sent them early and often with the same message to say, correct your behavior. So here we go. Again, some of these texts you may have heard me read earlier, but it's important. Jeremiah 7, we're going to begin in verse 13. Jeremiah 7 and verse 13, and that is on page 1345, 713. Here we go. And now, because you have done all these works, saith Jehovah, and I spake unto you, get this, rising up early and speaking, but ye heard not. And I called you, but ye answered not. Therefore will I do unto the house which is called by my name, wherein you trust, and unto the place which I gave to you and to your fathers, as I did to Shiloh. And I will cast you out of my sight as I have cast out all your brethren, even the whole seed of Ephraim. Notice that. Not only does he send, but he sends early. Look at the next text on my list, chapter 11, Jeremiah 11, beginning in verse 6. Jeremiah 11, beginning in verse 6. And by the way, these texts are written, this is one of the things that I think is so remarkable, because who else, what other people, other than the people of Israel, record their worst behaviors, right? This is sort of an embarrassing thing, and that makes it feel more authentic. Because you would think they would say, well, we did the right thing, the temple just fell, Babylon was mean. But that's not what it says at all. Verse 6, 11, and Jehovah said unto me, proclaim all these words in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem, saying, hear ye the words of this covenant and do them, for I earnestly protested unto your fathers in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt, even unto this day, rising early, there it is, and protested, saying, obey my voice. Yet they obeyed not, nor inclined their ear, but walked after every one of them in the stubbornness of their evil heart. Therefore I brought upon them all the words of this covenant, which I commanded them to do, but they did them not. Next text, Jeremiah chapter 25, beginning in verse 3. Jeremiah 25. By the way, Jeremiah 25, verse 3, if I needed to give you a date for this is moving into the 40-year period, so it's 603 BCE, chapter 25. Is that what it's? Yeah, 25 and verse 3. Here we go. From the 13th year of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah, even unto this day, these 23 years. That's how I know what year it is, because I know what year was the 13th year of Josiah. The word of Jehovah hath come unto me, first person, and I have spoken unto you, rising up early and speaking, but ye have not hearkened. And Jehovah hath sent unto you all his servants the prophets, rising up early and sending them, but ye have not hearkened nor inclined your ear to hear. And it goes on and it gives us a little background on what that message was, but we've got more text to look at. I've got 10 to go through. Chapter 26, please. Jeremiah 26, beginning in verse 2. Remember, this is the temple sermon, same as chapter 7, but here we get more detail. Thus saith Jehovah, stand in the court of Jehovah's house, and speak unto the cities of Judah, which come to worship to Jehovah's house, all the words that I command thee to speak unto them. Diminish not a word. It may be that they will hearken and turn every man from his evil way, that I may repent me of the evil which I purpose to do unto them because of the evil of their doings. Thou shalt say unto them, thus saith Jehovah, if you will not hearken to me to walk in my law, which I have set before you, to hearken to the words of my servants, the prophets, whom I send unto you, even rising up early and sending them, but ye have not hearkened, then will I make this house like Shiloh, and will make this city a curse to all the nations of the earth. And the priest and the prophets and all the people heard Jeremiah speaking these words in the house of Jehovah. Look at chapter 29. These are all easy to follow. 29, verse 19. Here we go. Just picking up. You read the context later. Because they have not hearkened to my words, saith Jehovah, wherewith I sent unto them my servants the prophets, rising up early and sending them, but ye would not hear, saith Jehovah. Anybody notice a pattern? Sending prophets, not only sending them early and often with a message, and they would not listen. Okay, so that was 29. Let's look at 32, chapter 32, verse 32 and 33. Because of all the evil of the children of Israel and the children of Judah, which they have done to provoke me to anger, they, their kings, their princes, their priests, their prophets, and the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and they have turned unto me the back and not the face. No, I taught them, rising up early and teaching them, yet they have not hearkened to receive instruction. And it goes on and on. But it's the same old story. Chapter 35, verse 14, part B. But I have spoken unto you, rising up early and speaking, and you have not hearkened unto me. I've sent also unto you all my servants the prophets, rising up early and sending them, saying, Return ye every man from his evil way, and amend your doings, and go not after other gods, etc. You see the message, the consistent message? Now let's look at chapter 44, Jeremiah 44. We're almost through with Jeremiah's warnings. Verse 4. Jeremiah 44 and verse 4 and 5 says the following, Howbeit, I sent unto you all my servants the prophets, rising up early and sending them, saying, Oh, do not this abominable thing that I hate. But they hearken not, nor incline their ear to turn from their wickedness, to burn no incense unto other gods. Therefore, my wrath and mine anger was poured forth, and so forth. Right? So it's the same message over and over. But it's not just Jeremiah. I have two more passages that I want to read. I want you to go with me to 2 Chronicles chapter 36. And as you'll see in this study and future studies, particularly future studies, Chronicles, Divrei Hayamim, as it's called, the words of the days, this is the official court record. Chapter 36, look at verse 14. Moreover, all the chiefs of the priest and the people trespassed very greatly after all the abominations of the nations, and they polluted the house of Jehovah, which he had hallowed in Jerusalem. And Jehovah, the God of their fathers, sent unto them by his messengers, rising up early and sending, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. That's the wording of the chronicler. But they mocked the messengers of God and despised his words and scoffed at his prophets until the wrath of Jehovah arose against his people, till there was no remedy. There's no healing. You can't fix it. It's too messed up. It's too far gone. It's off the leash. There's no turning back. Over and over and over, time and time again, God would send his prophets, his servants, the prophets, rising early to proclaim that doom was impending. All they had to do was repent. Now, thankfully, the writers told this story. I have another one. Look at Nehemiah chapter 9, beginning in verse 26. It's on page 832 in the Cross-Reference Bible. And this is the sum of it, warning after warning. But notice what it says. Nevertheless, they were disobedient and rebelled against thee, and cast thy law behind their back, and slew thy prophets that testified against them, to turn them again unto thee, and they wrought great provocations. You know, as painful as that is to read, that's what the story tells. Amos chapter 3 and verse 7. Interesting passage, particularly when it comes to the material we're coming now, that we're studying now. Page 1667, if you're in the Cross-Reference Bible. Amos 3:7 says the following, Surely the Lord Jehovah will do nothing unless he reveals his secret unto his servants, the prophets. So he's going to use the prophets to tell the end from the beginning. He's going to use the prophets to say, you've got to turn around. You're headed to destruction. Before the first temple fell, God did send prophets to warn of impending doom. Those warnings went unheeded for 40 years and even more. My question is this. If God does nothing without revealing his secret unto his servants the prophet, and if history repeats itself, if you say, is there anything new, or is it Nothing new under the sun. What has been is what shall be. If we take those from the pen of the sacred authors and we say there's a pattern that led to the destruction of the first, is there also a 40-year period that led to the destruction of the second temple period? If God sent his servants, the prophets, to warn of impending doom prior to the temple's destruction, first temple, is he going to do it for the second temple? Or did that only apply once? The second temple fell in the month of Av in 70 AD, or 70 of the Common Era. Now, if we back up 40 years, remember the first temple fell in 587-86 BC. We back it up 40 years, it's 627-26 BC, and Jeremiah was called, and others as well. If we back up 40 years from 70, that puts us in 30, in the year 30 AD or CE. Any signs or sermons that you can think of about impending doom? Did anybody in the year 30, according to sacred historians, you can argue the validity all you want, but are there any sources which predict that the temple would fall? And I'm talking about looking at a lot of sources, Jewish sources. We have to ask ourselves, was there any sign or sermon that things were going to be destroyed? What do we know about that time period of 40 years before the destruction of the second temple? Do we have any sources? Who were the actors? Who were the players on the ground at that time? What did they say? What was it like? What were the priests like? What were their behaviors? Do we know any of the leadership? We know any of the rulers of the time? We actually have quite a bit. We know the following. Tiberius Caesar was the emperor. We know anything about him? Sure, we've got some records. We could study that. We have a guy by the name of Pontius Pilate, who was prefect. Some call him procurator, but he's actually a prefect at that time. So we know Pontius Pilate is the prefect. We know that we have Herod Antipas and Herod Philip, or rulers of the land, and we know a high priest. We know who was high priest, a guy by the name of Joseph Caiaphas. So we know a lot, but the question is, did God send somebody to warn that the second temple would be destroyed? And if he did, I'm not saying he did, I'm saying if he did, do we have a record of that? And if we have a record of that, can we rely on that record? And if we can rely on that record, do we know how they were treated? If a messenger came with a word from God that the temple would be destroyed, how were they treated? Were they treated well and people straightened up? Or were these two, as in also, mocked and beaten and imprisoned or killed? Those are the questions. But for that, don't miss Sunday school, because we're going to get into that in the next Sunday school class. We're going to drop right into this second temple period. We got to look at it. We have to look at who were the players, who were the people on the scene. Is the script the same? Can we make certain comparisons? Can we analyze the text that we know, the sources that we've got? What do we know? That's what we're going to do. Now listen, if you're with me live, there is a discussion that's going to follow this class. If you're part of our support team, our YACOD, thank you very much. You're going to be on a Zoom call with me. We're going to bring in everyone else on YouTube where they can watch the first few minutes of this. And then afterwards, we're going to spend some time discussing this class, the details of it, You get to offer your perspective. You get to tell me what you think, whether you agree, whether you disagree, whatever. Those are the kind of things that we're going to do. And I'm also going to talk a little bit more about the method that I'll use going forward and the sources that I'm going to be using. So you don't want to miss that. Listen, if you're here and you've not yet subscribed, if you liked today's class and you're happy to be part of my Sunday school class, God bless you. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Hit the like button. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe and join me next week. God bless you. Thank you very much.